missing a leg of the tripod when you're talking to them about that. I think one of the other things I learned is that my job was part of my purpose. I think, we talked a little bit of this last night, physicians tend to be identified by their job title as much as they are by who they're married to or any thing that's about them personally. In the time that since we left, Maggie got a phone call at 11 o'clock last night from someone who had a seizure that wanted to talk to me on the phone, and I got yelled at on Facebook in a private message about a person I never met before about vaccine rights, right? I'm just trying to have a Friday night, y'all.
And that is why privatized basis.
So that's the kind of thing. It's like our purpose gets wrapped up in our job, and that's not a recipe for us being healthy people. Our purpose in life is not our job. Our job is to how important what our purpose should be. And we forget that too much. Now, I think anybody that you would talk to would tell you that this is an issue nationally that's getting much, much worse by any measure. Physician burnout, physician problems are becoming more and more of a problem. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is healthcare is changing a lot. Most of the people in this room have had a front row seat to that. I am in a very weird generation where I learned clinic on paper written notes. I learned to write prescriptions myself. All of my documentation was handwritten in residency. X-rays were still on films. And I tell the medical students this, that y'all, and they look at me like I'm a dinosaur. They're like, films? What is a film? One of them asked me, like, did you have to go to like Walgreens and pick it up? And they thought that it was like a picture you developed. And I'm like, no, I mean, it was... but then right after my residency, all that went away, right? And we all know what happened. Electronic medical record happened, and there are major pluses to electronic medical records from a patient standpoint and to a certain degree from a physician standpoint, but really from a hospital administrator standpoint, that's who likes it the best, and insurance companies and lawyers.
That's true.
So medicine shifted completely. And in the middle of that came a lot of other pressures, like if you have to buy a $30 million electronic medical record, how are you going to survive as a mom and pop physician's clinic? You can't afford to be a practice by yourself anymore. And medicine changed completely. I think too, expectations change of what we are and what we can do. When I talk to the physicians who were a generation ahead of me, very commonly, and specifically about, peds, what I know, we'd be talking about children with severe chronic illness. And I would say, they're 15 and now they're too big for the, what do I do? And they'd be like, we've never had people with this live to 15. And I'd be like, what do you mean? Here they are. And they'd be like, no. The life expectancy for children with this diagnosis is 3 years. And until 10, 15, 20 years ago, every one of them died by 3 years. And so I think for one of the things that I find most challenging is that not only has the ability to do medicine gotten harder because now I'm doing so much more with a computer screen. I talk to the residents about how the sound of 15 keyboards is now the sound of healthcare, right? Like that's what it sounds like to do healthcare now. But the people that I'm taking care of are significantly more ill than perhaps they were 30 years ago. And what is available to make them better is significantly more advanced. But with that comes a lot more paperwork, a lot more things that have been heaped on our pile. Y'all know this. This is not news to any of you. We've moved into being employees, which is sometimes a very good thing and sometimes a very bad thing for what we expected. When I was a medical student, I did a week. It was a fascinating week. But I still don't understand what we were supposed to, why we were allowed to do this. It was when I was at Ole Miss, and my sophomore year for spring break, we went to Washington, D.C., and we feigned being homeless for a week. And lived on the streets and ate at homeless shelters. Why in the world? I was in a North Face in Iraq, living on the street eating homeless shelters. That is not a way for us to serve the Lord. But while we were there, we also had a book with Trent Lott, so that was in our homeless wear. He saw met us on Thursday, which probably should have met us on Monday. But he said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" I said, "Well, I want to be a small town Mississippi doctor and get paid in chickens." And I think that is what we all went into medicine, maybe not going to be a small town, get paid chickens, but I think that simplicity is what craved when we came to medicine in the first place. And none of us would describe our day as existing anywhere near with that level of ease, patient interface, ability to take care of people with that degree of flexibility, right? None of those things are what medicine really is. And so we have this huge mismatch. So all this stuff is super depressing, right? And I'm a big believer, and I tell my kids all the time that knowledge is power, and you should never make a decision without all the variables. If you don't know what the variables are, you just stop, make a decision later. But knowledge is always power. Knowing the information is always better. So this is not a time for ostriches. One of the reasons that we're in this mess is because we stuck our head in the sand for too long. And it's time for us to do things like this, sit around the table with each other and say these things out loud to each other face to face and try to deal with the consequences of that and be very vulnerable. I mean, I think one of the things that was very key about last night is that none of us really feel like vulnerability is a skill set that we are taught, ever. That's not something that we're, at least in how we interface with each other. And I promise we'll swing around to a high note. So, how many of y'all have seen these polls, and I love them, because I just like, every time I see one, I put in a PowerPoint presentation. Most of the time they're on Facebook, sometimes they're in a Medscape email, but they're like, would you do medicine again? Have y'all seen these polls? What I'm talking about? So, and I love how scientific they are, right? Super scientific. The biggest one is a WebMD poll, 24,000 doctors, so that's a lot of doctors that are all active on WebMD, and you can derive from that what you will. Representing 25 specialties, and only 54% of them said they would choose medicine again as a career. This was in like 12, 13. So over half, just barely half, said they would do medicine again. But the year before, 69% of them said they would have. So I'm guessing that 23,000 of them got headache in 2013. That's what I would take away from it. But only 41% of those 24,000 would choose the same specialty again. They felt like they made a mistake in choosing their specialty. And that's the world that we're growing up young healthcare providers in, is they hear from us, we would do this again, right? I'd never do medicine again. Which is kind of a scary thing to hear when you're 23 and you just majored in biochemistry and all you ever want to do is see patients and get paid in chickens, right? So I get asked about that a lot from students. It's like, would you do John Ronald again? Would you do it again? Would you do medicine again? Should I do? We get asked that a lot. Perhaps more importantly is that at any given time, 15 to 30% of us would positively screen for depression. In America, 15 to 30% of physicians at any given time would positively screen for depression, which is crazy given what we expect of our physicians. Because if you were to say 15 to 30% of, I'm trying to pick a career that's not insulting, any other career, fill in the blank, whatever you want to do, that 15 to 30% of them are depressed, and then still expect them to work 6 to 8 weeks, 16-hour days, that sort of thing, and making the kind of decisions that we make. That is a scary number. Perhaps more scary than that is that we're now up to 400 physician suicides a year or more in America every year. So we lose UMC's entire medical school every year to suicide, not the actual medical. But that across the country in America today, we lose 400 plus. We're number one. We moved into physician suicide being a pretty regular thing. And we are starting to see growing rates of especially student and resident suicide, which I think for some reason feels so much sharper to know that that our students and our residents are already that early in their career feeling like the only answer is to take their life. But again, we tend to not really talk about it. We fake it until we make it. Weakness is not acceptable. At the end of the day, I think those polls are kind of laughable. Of course, every one of us would do medicine again, right? What else am I going to do? I have terrible ADD. I can't do anything with my hands, right? So, like, what else am I doing? But more importantly, healthcare is like the most amazing, intimate way to meet someone when they're their most vulnerable, right? It is a beautiful, trustworthy profession that is a real honor to do. And I really do think, especially in Mississippi, that we are just as much practicing a ministry. Any one of us could leave and go live in some other town with some other patient population, with some other headaches, but with perhaps more prestige or more money or more whatever, fill in the blank. Any of us could do that. I think practicing medicine and medicine in particular very much is a mission and a ministry, because we are providing health care to people in many cases no one else wants to or would. And that's a big deal. We should recognize that. We should be very thankful for that. So where does all that come from? Where does all this dissatisfaction come from? If we know that our job is valuable, why do half of us say we wouldn't do it again? If we know that our job is important, why are 400 of us a year killing ourselves? And that's where the concept of burnout comes in. Now, I have a very long relationship with the word burnout. My grandmother, Mary Huckabee Ingram, who was 6'3", she was descended from Scottish people, and she had this gigantic red kind of curly mop of hair. She was a tough woman, tough woman. She had my dad and his twin when she was 43 at the end of a tobacco sharecropping row by herself. And that was pregnancy number 5. She had 6 kids. She had the twins by herself. My alcoholic grandfather was in jail at the time. He was the Otis, for those of you who are Americans. I'm not kidding. When the jail opened, they named one of the cells after him because they just knew either that much. But so she had these babies at the end of the tobacco by herself, and she got up after the baby was born. Her 12-year-old daughter came over. She said, "Take the twins inside. I got to finish picking the tobacco," and then picked the rest of the tobacco for the day because she was a sharecropper and the tobacco needed to come in. She was going to do it. This is a tough lady. By the time I met her, she was even tougher. But she would, every day from 3 to 3:30, she would stand at this, and I remember it being almost celestial height ironing board. I mean, she's 6'3", she had this ironing board way up high. And Budweiser used to make a 24-ounce tall boy. So she would sip Budweiser, and then she had snuff right here, and she would spit snuff. And I still to this day do not understand the mechanics of how a person can be dipping snuff and drinking Budweiser at the same time and not aspirate tobacco snuff. But no one understood her mystery. She also made great biscuits. I don't understand that. So, and she would watch Wapner, and she would smoke while she's doing her ironing. And she would, if her cigarette got low, she would scream, "I got burnout, I got burnout." And it was like the best game ever. She had like 26 grandkids. We'd all be there watching Wapner, breathing in secondhand smoke, drinking a little Budweiser or whatever. And as soon as she got burnout, it was our job to go find the cigarettes and bring her a new one, because Emma better not run out of her cigarette, right? So whenever I hear the word burnout, I go back to this very specific, like 8-year-old substance abuse riddled Scottish woman. But I love my favorite definition of burnout. You know how I feel about the word wellness. My favorite, and this was published in JAMA, I'm not making this up. Burnout was defined as the antithesis of wellness. Can you imagine? I just cannot even imagine. There's tons of very well published data out there. There's more and more articles published about physician burnout. It is not a new concept. It's been around since the 70s. It's just, it took a long time for us to recognize that it was a problem in our field, and it took a long time for us to talk about it. So it's been, occupational burnout has been around for a long time in the past 5 to 10 years, and I suspect to some degree because the push from the younger generation that wants to talk about this kind of stuff has really moved it more solidly into medicine. But it basically lives in the world of emotional exhaustion. We've all been there, right? Everybody's been there in general, but physicians tend to live there, especially when we're young. Cynicism and hostility, and then negative self-evaluation. And if that is not a recipe for a physician, right? We pour until we have nothing left to give emotionally. And then that turns into a cynicism because, as I said last night, I'm not a Burger King and you can't have it your way. And then I put up the walls, and the walls tend to turn hostile. And then the whole time I'm telling myself, this is good enough, you're not good enough, it's not good enough, this is good, this is what you're supposed to do. And that's like the perfect scenario for an ongoing problem. There are lots of big words, lots of concepts about how this works, but generally burnout comes from 2 places. And these are the 2 places that when I'm working with someone who's unhappy, I try to figure out which one of these 2 places is your itch not getting scratched. scratch. The first is autonomy, right? We talk all the time about patient autonomy. It is now literally part of a course for medical students to downgrade how much authority physicians have over their patients and talk more about patient autonomy. And that is a very laudable goal. In the meantime, we have lost more and more of our actual daytime workplace autonomy. And that's easy to see for a lot of reasons. And then the other is diminished expected reward. So I haven't been paid in a chicken yet, and if I did get paid in a chicken, I wouldn't know what to do with it, right? So my reward of what I think I'm doing every day very rarely looks like what I think it's going to be. And then I tend to follow that with 4:30 meetings from a hospital administrator who tell me that I'm not making enough productivity, right? Like that's how my reward is not what it is, and I'm never being told you did a good job, right? I'm never getting that feedback, which is selfish and ugly, but we are human, and we need to feel like what we're doing has some kind of reward. That is to internalize, though, and we need to remember that sometimes our reward is not necessarily what we define right now. Our reward may be something far greater that God is calling us to, and we forget that sometimes. So, we have lack of control over our schedule, we have lack of autonomy, and potentially diminished expected reward. There is nothing that cuts me to the core more than missing a kid's athletic event that I thought I was going to get to go to, and then have to miss it the last minute because of, very rarely is it an actual emergency. Someone else, like a committee meeting emergency to me is not an emergency ever, right? But now I got to miss that volleyball game or that t-ball game or whatever that I thought I was going to be able to go to or be part of, and now I'm not. Or I'm going to be late to someone's birthday party or something like that. That lack of control, it hits on my autonomy and my expected reward. One of the biggest problems, and I watched tons of people retire over this issue because they were like, it's not even worth it to even try. I am not an IT tech, right? If the printer is broken, I am not the person to fix it, right? And so if the Epic doesn't log in and I can't do anything, then I'm stuck. And that's the situation I find myself in. None of us are IT techs. And that creates a lot of stress about what we thought we were going to be doing with our career in that day. And then there's the concept, so there's this great article that was in the New Yorker last year that was talking about World War I veterans and how when World War I veterans came back, they were diagnosed with what was called moral injury. Okay? And you read this article and you're like, ooh, good, I like this, moral injury, boy, I like that word. And then in the middle they pivot, and suddenly they're talking about physicians. So and no one is saying that an ER shift is like the horrors of World War I. That's not what their point was at all. But the concept of the day in, day out, chronic nature, the acute stuff on top of the chronic stuff with no valve tends to build up and create for an explosive situation. And so they were actually calling to move the term burnout to more of a moral injury. And I think, as a Christian physician, that term may be my new favorite thing about this conversation. Because I think burnout tends to put a lot of blame on you as the person. You didn't do it, you're burned out, right? So you must not be good enough, smart enough, cute enough, fast enough, whatever, because you're burned out. When in reality, we are all suffering from the constructs of the workplace environment and the situation that we go into. And I think that moral injury is a little bit more third person and a little bit, honestly, more reflective of what actually is going on there, where you start to lose your empathy and your care. The other interesting thing, and if you look around, I had a guy in my class who had 3 wives in medical school. Right? Fast mover.
Not all at the same time, though.
Not all at the same time. That's a great point. No. They were all, yeah. Now, he dated while he was divorcing, obviously. You have to. You only have 4 years. It's fast turnaround. Lawyers don't work that fast. But this concept of like our career is who we are and our career is not satisfying us doesn't stay in our hospital or in our clinic. We bring it home with us, right? Burnout physicians are much more prone potentially to depression, yeah, but they're also just not very nice to live with, right? They're not fun to be around. So they tend to kick the can down the road a little bit. A lot more spousal conflict, higher rates of divorce, not great parenting results, right? I sometimes will look at Maggie and say, you know, how would you describe me in our first 5 years of marriage? Kind of like, don't answer, I don't want to know. Right? I don't want to know what you were, especially that adult neurology residency year, we just won't talk about that. I was actually depressed that year. But I was mean, and I look back on that time and just kind of go, ugh. And it wasn't because Maggie was a different person or we had all this family conflict. It was because I was bringing all that stuff home with me.
I used to say I didn't do it. You know, like don't be mad at me.
Right. Right, I didn't do it. I'm just here. It's just a Tuesday. I didn't do this. I don't deserve this. I think that if Maggie could use a word to describe me back then, she would use the word consumed. What an ugly word. Because I was so driven to be the best pediatrician I could be, to get that fellowship and then to get that next fellowship and to be that guy that everyone calls when they have that one kid and to be that, we talked about this to some degree last night, that pride of being the doctor, the best one at my place or whatever. I was consumed with that. It had eaten everything about me. And you know what? That's idolatry, right? One of the problems with, especially as a male physician, because I look at the Bible for this stuff, and I firmly believe that this is rooted in Adam's curse. All the way back when. This is part of the toil of our brow that Adam got condemned to, is that men will chase their careers and neglect everything else about their life. And it is far too easy for who I am as a physician and for how I feel when I'm at the hospital and do something amazing to become my idol and to become very, very quickly about something internal to me and not an external form of glorifying God, which is what we're called to do. 1 in 2 physicians will experience burnout in their career. So in this room, half of us probably right now are a little bit burned out. 30 to 70% from field to field. Rehab has it the least. I figured it would be derm. I don't want to throw stones at dermatologists, but they all have great skin, and I assume that comes from good living. But rehab doctors have it the least. ER doctors have it the most, but everyone gets it. And now we're seeing it creep up more and more and more, so 50% of our medical students and 50% of our residents are experiencing it as well. When I gave this talk to the students, but that last lecture talk, I only had one PowerPoint slide, and it was this slide. I want you to imagine a graph where it's like, here's this y-axis, here's the x-axis, here's the scale, so like, here's where we are, and then we just do this. And there were no labels on it. So I said, what do you all think this is? And it's a full room, so nobody said anything. It was medical student empathy. So first year medical students, fourth year medical students. And it's been studied multiple different ways. And it's been studied genders. So women are up here, guys are down here. But then we fall at the same curve. It's just, they start better than us, end better than us, but they still fall. And that's really sad, because what that suggests to me is that in medical school, we are beating the empathy out of our students. We are teaching them to be non-empathetic, which then makes them do the exact same thing when they're residents, and then when they're done. That curve just continues to fall. And it's kind of heartbreaking, right? They come so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and we beat it out of them. We teach them how to care less about their patients. Which is a really sad thing. I think in general, there are going to be a lot of times when we're not in control and we don't feel in control, or that we feel like we're not getting the satisfaction that we thought we were going to be. But I want you to imagine some of the people that you work with that were truly miserable. Like just think of a person right now. Maybe you. I mean, I have at times been far more miserable than anybody that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And think about why they were miserable. Some people are just miserable people to be around, and that's just who they are, and that's their path. I was listening to a podcast last night from one of the I don't know how they're connected to Dave Ramsey, but it's a Dave Ramsey kind of thing, podcast on leadership. And they were talking about, it was 2 people, and they worked in a faith-based kind of thing, and they fired an employee. And they were talking about how difficult it was to make the decision to fire someone, because they run their business like a family. right? So if we're a family, then how do we fire somebody? And the main reason that they fired this person was for gossiping, right? The whole concept of, as a leader, how do you handle gossiping? And they had talked about some other things to do before that. Then they were saying there is a place where there are people out there that your enterprise will do better than the work anymore, right? And so, and they fired this person expecting tons and tons and tons of fallout. She's gone 20 minutes and had 3 emergency phone calls from other employees, all thanking them for firing her because, but she's holding us back. There are those people out there that are miserable people. But then there are those people out there who are really, really great folks who are going through a season of life. And I want you to think about which one of their itches were they getting scratched. Was it because they didn't have any control over their days, they had no autonomy? Or was it because they were not getting any kind of reward back from their job, right? And when I look back on people, and sometimes I will say to folks, you are having a problem. And when a residency comes to us in the GME office and says, we're having bad scores on wellness, or we're having a resident complaining of this, I always couch it in those 2 terms. Is it an autonomy problem, or is it a satisfaction problem? Because one of those 2 things is not getting met, and those sound very similar, but they're really 2 very different things. We had a residency come to us and say, we scored very, very lowly on a survey question that we need help with. And I'm like, okay. And the survey, and I hate surveys, which is comical because now it's a whole thing. But the survey question was, I feel like my job here matters and I'm making a difference in the world. And their residents scored on average a 1.2 out of 5 on that scale. And so they're like, so we're thinking about like having them run more rounding teams, and I'm like, I get it, the autonomy, but you have to understand, they're not saying they don't feel autonomous. They're saying they don't matter in your unit. That is a different problem that you need to tackle very, very differently. And so for that group, we had a Fellow of the Month where they were recognized like on a bulletin board so that all the nurses could know them. They really did want them to run more rounding teams, so they felt that sense of autonomy. But that was a problem primarily with recognition and with feeling fulfilled at work that they needed to challenge. Think about those people. When you're interacting with folks, know that you're working with burned out people. It's still going to be a thing after this weekend. Monday you're going to go to work and you're going to interact with somebody and they're going to be a crab. And just think, why are they like this? Is it because their chemicals are off and we need to throw some pills at that? Or is it because they are not feeling fulfilled, or because they're not able to do what they want to do today? And not surprisingly, those kind of positions and us when we are like that make mistakes more. It's a vicious cycle because then our nursing staff and our co-workers don't want to say to us, hey, are you sure that's what you meant? Because they're scared, so then they don't say anything, and patient outcomes suffer. So if you rank burnout physicians with patient outcomes, usually that's best done in surgery environments. Throw that at the surgeons. But it's easy to measure their outcomes, and it usually is linked to the OR staff gets very, very quiet. And so outcomes suffer because that people don't speak up when they notice something because they're afraid to incur someone's wrath. And you get all those kind of feelings when things are not about you, right? We all are very smart. We love to play that game. Well, if I was a real estate agent, I'd be ... right? We love to play that game because we all feel very fluffy, and we feel very smart, we feel very good about ourselves. And if I wasn't in medicine, I would just imagine what I had done if I had not done 12 years of school after college, right? That's real fun to do at your 10-year reunion in particular. I'm going to tell you all a story from when I was younger. So I had this kid who came into this was an intern, and this kid that came into the hospital for seizures. I was general peds at this point, and this was my first successful solo lumbar puncture. So I'm feeling good, right? And it's like August, and I'm just all over my feelings about how important I am. And I had been concerned that it was herpes, and had started the baby on an appropriate dose of herpes medicine. So I'm a lifesaver. Right, y'all can pat me on the back later for my healing enterprises. And I'm feeling real good about who I am that day. And about 11 o'clock that night, this is a 3-week-old, I got a call from one of the nurses who says, hey, we can't find your patient. And I'm like, well, it's 11 p.m., but it's a 3-week-old. So they don't wander off. Like, what do you mean you can't find her? And they said, mom's gone, baby's gone. There's a cyclotron hanging, and we have no idea where they've been. So I'm like, well, I don't have them. Like, what am I supposed to do in this moment? How do I best help you be your best self? So we called the Code Pink, and we're out looking for them, and I happened to find them. And don't ask me why, but I knew where they were walking down the side of Woodrow Wilson up towards I-55 in a wagon with a cyclotron hanging from the ivy pole on the wagon. It's 11:30 at night when I find them. And so I go up to this woman, and I am just crazed with anger, right? I am so upset. I'm like, what are you doing? It's 11:30 at night, this is 3-week-old. Where are you going? She goes, I'm walking to Yazoo City. And I'm like, man, you are not walking to Yazoo City. What is the matter with you? You are not. And things escalated very, very quickly. The police got involved, not because of me necessarily, but you know, I am feeling just a sense of real, how dare you disrespect me, mother of the 3-week-old with herpes, when I did so much for your kid. I did the lumbar puncture, I did the H&P, I perfectly dosed the baby. I'm working so hard to get your baby better. How dare you just leave my hospital and wander off and take this kid? I mean, what is the matter? And we kind of have this fuss and fight about how she's leaving, and I say, no, you're not, and I'm going to get a judge, da-da-da-da-da. And finally, my very smart, very Cajun upper level comes up. She finds us in the parking lot, and she says, ma'am, can I ask why you were going to Yazoo City? Like, why would you leave the children's hospital 11:30 at night to go to Yazoo City? And she said, well, the nurses told me that my other baby can't stay, and I don't have anything to do with her, and I can't leave my 3-week-old, so I just thought the best thing to do to leave. And I looked down, and the entire time that she and I had been fussing with each other, there was a 2-year-old in the wagon watching it with the 3-week-old that I had not even noticed, because I was so fixated on how this woman had wronged me, right? Because of my autonomy. I don't want to be out here at 11:39. I've got better things to do than chase you down and find you in the parking lot going to Yazoo City. And you are not thanking me enough, right? That I have neglected the fact that I'm dealing with a young mother who is by herself with her 2-year-old and her 3-week-old, who's very ill. And the nurses are saying her 2-year-old's got to go. And she didn't have a car, and she didn't want to leave her 3-week-old. So she did the only thing that made sense to her. She put them both in the wagon, she just going to walk home. That story is heartbreaking for me to tell as a 40-year-old about myself 15 years ago. I missed so much, but it is very, very illustrative of what this concept is, right? This concept of none of my needs were being met. And here's the thing about medicine, that's never going to change, no matter what kind of epic we get, or how much support staff we have, or whether or not the printers work in clinic. That is clearly a hot button issue for me that I need some side work on. Is that medicine is never about you, right? Those people that we interact with every day are going through the worst imaginable thing to them in that moment. And for us, it's just a Thursday night, late at night. I was watching a VH1 pop-up video when that nurse called me and told me that kid had wandered off. That was literally what they disturbed, was my VH1 watching. And I reacted that way, right? Medicine never gets to be about us. And for the spouses in the room, you have to see part of who your spouse is, because medicine, that it's not about them. They don't get to be about them. We have missed that boat as a culture of physicians and dentists and healthcare providers. We have identified that this needs to be about us, that medicine, how we do as a physician, reflects who we are as a person. We've missed all of that. But our bread and butter is sadness. You know, yesterday, right before I came here, I diagnosed a 3-year-old with a new brain tumor. And that was just a Friday afternoon for me, right? We deal in sadness. That is maybe the dermatologists don't, but the rest of us, you know, we deal in really upsetting situations that on any given day of the week would blow most Americans' hair back, and that's just our one day at work that day. So you can't thrive in your job. That is not where you thrive. That is not where we as Christians in particular thrive. Your career is a mission. It is a big part of who you are. It is an honor to be what we are, but it is not your purpose here on earth.
That is not where you were created. Nowhere in any of the catechisms does it have a line for physicians were created to be real good at prescribing stuff, right? That is not how any of us work as humans. It's not going to fulfill you completely. The sooner we realize that that's not where our fulfillment comes and we start looking for fulfillment in other places, the better healthcare person and Christian we will be. A couple of years ago, I was at Virginia for a meeting. Any of y'all been to Virginia in Charlottesville? So they got that beautiful like street thing, right? Then kind of the downtown area, and I'm sure it used to be a street, but now it's just a walking paved brick. Lots of weed. That's the take-home point. Tons of marijuana. It also happened to be April the 20th, which may have been relevant to why there was lots of weed out that day on 420. But it was so funny because I had just left a talk where they were talking about this very issue. And in amongst all the weed was this one little booth that was selling those little air plants, right? The little plants that you put in a seashell and stick in a magnet on your fridge and you never water it, and it just kind of looks like hair kind of that grows on your fridge. I've never understood the attraction myself. But the concept of it is you never do anything to it and it just thrives off of your good graces and the refrigerator light, I guess. I don't know how it works. But this guy is trying to sell all of these very excited cannabis users on these air plants, and their minds are just blown. And the biggest thing for them is you never do anything to it, right? You don't put anything into this plant. It is exclusively there for your enjoyment, and you never have to do anything to it, and it will live forever in that environment, right? And then I'm in this all-day meetings with these people talking about how physicians don't ever pour into themselves, and they never invest in themselves. And we are training ourselves to be air plants. It was so clear to me. It might have been a little bit of the haze that was around the street that day, but it was so clear to me.
It was only secondhand marijuana.
That's right, only secondhand. My grandma and it's a lot of secondhand stuff going on. We are encouraged to never invest in ourselves, to never pour in ourselves. We have made ourselves out in idolatry to be these air plants that are always perfect, always right, never need a moment, never get to have a downtime. You are not an air plant. You're not an air plant. You were not created to exist as this like idol of what a human is supposed to look like and survive on that. And so I tell people all the time, you need to find something. You're being too much of an air plant right now. And all of my residents just go, I know there's an air plant. It's a shorthand thing, meaning you need other things. So what are those other things? Because guess what? If medicine never gets to be about you, then the rest of you needs to be about you, right? We need to be praying. We need to be, if you look at, this kind of goes in that conversation of how do you talk to a big group of people about this in healthcare. You know what's one of the best things about personal resiliency and burnout? Meditation. They found the answer. The answer is meditation. And I'm just sitting there going, guys, y'all just need Jesus, because that sounds just like prayer without any of the good stuff, right? I mean, they are trying so hard to find these ways to fix physician burnout, and so many of the ways that these novel things they're coming up with are the Christian life, right? Quiet times with yourself and your God, prayer, meditation of that word, if you like that word, exercise. I am so much nicer when I swim laps to my wife and kids. I think it's like they put Prozac in the pool at St. Donald's. I don't know what it is. But I get out and I'm just in such a better headspace when I do that. One of the things about burnout that's fun for me to think about is, where do we see it in the Bible, right? We talked a little bit about people who were passionate and made bad choices. And whether or not burnout is a sin. Right? I mean, I struggle with that a lot. I think certainly my responses to burnout can be very sinful, especially when they're rooted in the pride that we talked about last night, in the idolatry, in the selfishness, in those our lesser angels, kind of the moments of our ugliness that connect us with sin. But I would make the case that Jesus had burnout. And I will give you two examples. And they're the two ends of his ministry. It's funny to me that he starts both his first thing and his last thing. So the first miracle, the water into wine, and Mary comes up to Jesus and says, Jesus, no wine. And what does Jesus say? You remember what Jesus? He says, woman, what does this have to do with me? And have I not? I mean, that is classic. I've had a bad Tuesday. What does this have to do with me? Now, I'm sure Jesus was far more respectful, and I'm not advocating in any way that he was mouthing off to his mom, or certainly that there's any sin there. I think we take from that is he did not have that autonomy, right? That's where that was being forced upon him. And you see over and over and over again in his ministry where people are forcing healings and things upon him. And certainly Jesus does what Jesus wants. But there are many times in the Bible where Jesus says, this is not my time, it's not my time, it's not time, don't tell anybody. This is, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. And then the expected reward. You know, Jesus came to earth, lived here for 33 years, and then died. And then we look at him in the Garden of Gethsemane saying, if there's any way that this can be taken away from me. Now, I used to think when I was a kid that he's fearing the crucifixion. And certainly I'm sure any of us would. But I think it was more about now I've got to go to hell for 3 days. Which for him, I'm sure, is an eternity, right? Because he's going to be separated from God. That is not the reward that he deserved. And so in that moment, you get this flash of, this is not what I thought, this is not what I deserve, right? And I think that in that moment, we can take some comfort in those two things, where we feel like our autonomy is not being met, or we feel like our expected reward is not what it's supposed to be. Feeling that way is not sinful. Talking about why we feel that way, I don't think is sinful. When we react to those things and we create negative life associations, I think sometimes that's when we have sin in our life. I want to counsel everyone in this room. When I was young, one of the best things that happened to me that converted me from this raging barbarian to hopefully a better human being at work and certainly at home is that one of my, you have those people in your life that are not your boss, that are tangentially your boss, that are kind of over you but not really. Dr. Parker calls them the principal of the junior high across the street from the junior high you go to. Those kind of people. Like, they can't really hurt you, but don't take them off. Like, that kind of hurts you. And they sat me down one day and they're like, look, I'm just going to say this and you can feel however you want to feel about it, but I need you to know I'm watching and you are choosing your mentors poorly. And my first response was, I'm not mentors. What are you talking about? I'm not. And they said, I'm watching your workplace behaviors, and I'm noticing some trends in some folks that you spend a lot of time, idolizing is probably the best word for it. Older physicians that I thought were just the bee's knees, and that I was channeling some of their behaviors when they were in times of stress. And that person said, I'll never want to talk to you about it again, but you are choosing your mentors poorly. And it would be my suggestion that you find some different mentors in your life, professionally, that you monitor and emulate. And I came home, and of course I'm mad, because that feels really personal. But I listened to, the next couple of times I was around those mentors, they were really ugly people to work with. So I just picked that person who said that to me, that said, you're choosing. I was like, well, you can just be my mentor instead. And that grew me up a lot. Now, in this room, most of us are in a place where we don't really need a lot of mentorship anymore. But you know who does? All of his students, right? All of the students at the medical school. Some of them work with y'all, rotate with y'all, watch you, see you at church, all that sort of thing. These are kids who are desperate for a rock to cling to. And I tell them all the time, choose a good mentor. I tell them that story, and I'm like, find people who emulate good behavior and be those people. I would say the same thing to y'all. I would just say, be those people. You know, make yourself a beacon of hope and light in Jesus and what a Christian physician or dentist or whatever is supposed to look like in the world around you. Figure out your purpose, right? Our purpose is not our job. We feel like it is, but it's not. And recognize, I was giving grand rounds to a residency on physician well-being, not wellness, because I don't like that term. And the chair of the department raised her hand and was like, I hate these talks. I was like, I do too, it's so fun. And she said, I'm so tired of being told that it's my responsibility to make my residents happy. And you hear that and you go, what a mean thing to say out loud, right? Wellness, well-being, is not the same thing as happiness. And I don't think any of us should be aiming to think that our job is going to make us happy. There's a lot of reasons for that, but the primary reason is that medicine is not a happy place. You're going to be, even if you have a great work environment and you love your coworkers, and you make whatever you want, and your printer always works, right? Even if you have all those things, you're still going to be able to die, right? Medicine is not a place where it's sunshine and roses. There's sadness and horribleness, and you're going to see social things that you just cannot imagine the world around you. When I was a senior in high school, my senior quote was Nehemiah 8:10. Primarily because the first half of the verse says, eat fat food and drink wine and be merry. I'm not kidding. And I put that in the JA annual because I thought it was fantastic. But the second half of the verse is, do not be sad, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. And I think that's where happiness comes from. Not from our jobs, but from our walk with Christ. My reward is my job. Right? Our reward should be our job. Our reward should not come from our job. And our job should be a way that we serve to glorify God, not the other way around. And I think lastly, the other thing that I always am real conscious of is, I think it's really easy, especially if you do something that's really relational, to be fixated constantly on your legacy at work. I think that's really easy for me as a pediatric neurologist, but had such a clinic practice. And I want people to think well of me, and I want 60 years from now to be all these kids running around that are now full-grown adults that still talk about me. That's ugly, right? We don't like to say that out loud. But we all have those feelings. We want this legacy. There was a study done at Academic Children's Hospital a couple of years ago where 3 years after someone retired, nobody knew their name anymore. Nobody knew who they were. 3 years, and their legacy was gone. You look at people like Blair Batson, and to him, I mean, his name is living outside of a hospital. And if you ask the average UMT employee, I have no idea. I couldn't think about a lineup, right? Even Dr. Evans, who was our chairman for 28 years, 2 years after he was gone, I was in a meeting and I was the only person in the room who knew who he was. 2 years. He was there for 28 years as the chairman of pediatrics. Your legacy is not going to come from work. We are not building legacies in healthcare, and part of that is because those are temporal, worldly things that we're doing. Our legacies, hopefully, are grounded far more in the relationships that we make, grounded in Christian legacy. And sometimes that means in what kind of parents we are, and how we treat our spouses, or aunts and uncles, or whatever. But sometimes that means being that mentor to that one student who needs someone to be a better role model for them as a person. So that's all I got. I have no idea if I went 15 over or 15 under or whatever. I'm just going to stop talking and see if there's any questions or comments or concerns.
I had one of our colleagues one time tell me the hospital will never love you back. And that really struck a chord with me because I'm a people pleaser. I like people to like me. I like to do a good job. And that's always been an issue for me. And so when he said that, I was like, oh my goodness, like
Right.
that is profound for me.
Right.
You know, so I've got to stop trying so hard, you know, because you could be gone for a year or two. And then
I had someone tell me one time, you're just as valuable as that brick in that wall right there. Right? Which is arguably maybe less valuable than the brick in the wall, because maybe the brick got the building to fall down.
Right.
And if I go home, probably nobody's going to notice. So no, it's true. I think we build this construct of like, we put so much of our self-importance in it that we almost, we create this concept that we matter so much, not just to the hospital, to the patients, to the things, and we do. We shouldn't undersell that as a real joy of being a doctor. The problem is you cannot stand on that alone. That cannot be where you find fulfillment or happiness or have the energy to come to work every day. Because if you're coming to work every day just for that, you run out. You're an airplane, right? You haven't put anything into yourself. And who we are as people is so much more than our clinic productivity or our successful numbers at a given procedure or what people think of us. Who we are as people is much longer lasting than any of that. And institutions will absolutely take everything they have and not care 2 years after you're gone.
I've been guilty of channeling unhappiness into a middle-age crisis wish list. What do you call it? A bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
And like whenever I get happy, I think, well, I work hard, so maybe I'll deserve this. And it's a list of things I want to buy, things I want to experience, and things I want to eat. And so I really, and it's just kind of become a reflex way of thinking. And God's been convicting me that, John, just dump out all that stuff, because just look at me, and I'm the giver of all those things. And you can have those things, but just remember to turn back to me.
Well, they're not going to make you happy, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, that's not going to fulfill you. And I gained 40 pounds my intern year. I tried real hard. Real hard. It was all Pop-Tarts.
Pop-Tarts!
I had unrestricted access to free Pop-Tarts, and I gained 40 pounds in 11 months. Because if I can't be happy at work, then I'll be happy with this Pop-Tart. None of it is it's all fleeting. And I think that
The Pop-Tart won't love you back.
the Pop-Tart I actually have a permanent
It will for
lifetime
5
burn that I'm
minutes.
happy to show you later. That is a Pop-Tart related injury. I tried to file workers' comp,
No.
and Dr. Kraut told me to leave. He didn't care. But it's from a brown
Look on your wife's
sugar
face.
and
It's
cinnamon
really
Pop-Tart, and I was tapping it in the toaster oven,
Yeah.
and the end of it fell off, and I tapped the brown sugar, and I've got like a line like that where the brown sugar just seared to my skin.
Mm.
Wow.
So I have a permanent reminder of my own gluttony and pride and not putting God first in my life because I replaced him with Pop-Tarts and how it doesn't work. And it literally scars you sometimes. All right.
It's funny, I have had a Pop-Tart conversation recently with people that go to work on Saturday mornings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We were saying that we should all eat Pop-Tarts while we're here anyway.
Absolutely. All right, you want to take a break?
Would you pray for us?
Yes, I'd love to pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much, God, just for this opportunity to just breathe, God, to get off of the carousel, and just experience a time of respite and a time of thinking out loud and a time of focusing who we are and what our purpose is back on you, God. We pray, Lord, that you will use this weekend as just a time of soothing and a balm to the rough edges in our life, God. And Father, we pray that you will constantly remind us of our need for you, that you will draw us closer to you as we go through our work days, and remind us that we are primarily created to love you and to glorify you. And our purpose in doing that is no more important than any other humans on this planet, God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.